Look out! Look out! Look out! Take care. You are being watched. We repeat, take care, for you are now alone with a killer. We warn you, don't let him see the fear in your eyes. For this is what he seeks, and this is why he kills.
Where are you? Where are you?
Look out for Carl Byrne as the Peeping Tom. Fear him, but pity him also.
It's no good.
Watch out for Moira Shearer as the lovely stand-in who innocently dances into danger.
Imagine someone coming towards you who wants to kill you, regardless of consequences.
A madman?
Yes.
Wait!
Anna Massey is the girl who falls victim to the charms of the lonely stranger upstairs.
Switch it off, Mark. Mark, switch it off.
Maxine Audley as the blind woman who senses the danger that threatens her and her daughter, but is helpless.
Don't be frightened.
Not frightened. Hot. So put that camera away!
There is no future for anyone who tries to befriend him. He invades the privacy of innocent people till the piercing eyes of his camera meet the terrified eyes of his victims. And with a compulsion akin to madness, he shoots the final, fearful scene.
For people of my generation, Michael Powell was Peeping Tom. That was the film that we discovered, we thought, in the 1960s.
I was working as an editor with Thelma, actually, Thelma's Goodmaker, on some of these documentaries. And there was this wonderful filmmaker, Jim McBride, who did David Holtzman's Diary. And he was the first to tell us about Peeping Tom.
It was like an underground film. It was hard to see. It had a scandalous reputation. But nobody knew too much about who Michael Powell was at this time.
He understood me in the deepest sense of the word, understood in the soul, in my feelings and whatsoever, is to me unique. I never had that with any other director in all my career.
He was like a slap in the face, I've always said, because he just, whenever he said anything, it was fresh and new. Cliches never even came anywhere near his brain.
If you just encountered him this way for the first time, you wouldn't have realized that he'd been one of the mainstays of British filmmaking right through the 1930s and through the 1940s, and in fact had been, in some ways, the most famous British filmmaker of the wartime period. He'd gone to France as a young man and got some experience working with Rex Ingram, who was a Hollywood director, and that had given him his first taste of what working on a big scale could be. This was just at the end of the 20s.
So he learned about editing, he learned about camera work, he learned about direction, acting. He even wrote titles for the silent film.
But the war gave him a fantastic opportunity, and he grabbed it with both hands. He formed a partnership with Emmerich Pressburger, a Hungarian refugee.
Michael's the only one who directed, but they both wrote and they both produced. And they were lucky enough that during the war, no one noticed what they were doing. They created all these original masterpieces, what Scorsese calls the greatest period of anarchy within a major film studio that's ever happened.
What links Powell throughout his films of Pressburger and ultimately the film which he's sole director on, Peeping Tom, is this sense of danger of art. And I think you get this in Red Shoes, where extraordinary Maura Schera, in a sense, dies for her art, and it's worth dying for. And this is something that I guess I accumulated as ideas accumulated over the years about why I was attracted to these films. And I think you sense this, a darker side of it, certainly, if you could go even darker. In Peeping Tom, you have this, where the art becomes sinister and perverse in a way, or the cinema itself can be perverse in a way, and the act of making movies can be perverse in a way.
In front of eyes, like eyes as full of...
I think Peeping Tom was a departure from Michael Powell. First of all, he was not working with Emmerich Pressburger. At that time, he was working with a new writer who did not know a great deal about film, but had wonderful original concept for the film.
Yes, I think Leo Marx came to Michael Powell with a project about a life of Freud.
They probably would have done that had they not heard that there was another project by John Huston with Jean-Paul Sartre, who was also planning to make a film about the life of Freud. So they thought, we can't do that, we've got to do something different. And at that point, Leo Marx came up with the idea of a film about a voyeur.
It's, as we say, a fortunate accident, because the project that they then moved to by a kind of displacement, I think was one that kind of analyzes the Freudian aspects of the human mind through the cinema in a way that perhaps would have been more difficult if they'd taken Freud more directly.
All right, ready? Action! Here we are, madam.
The central figure, Mark Lewis, was not played by an English actor, which would have been the obvious thing. He's meant to be an English character, but the choices that Powell had didn't work out, and Lawrence Harvey, who was then a very hot property, was snapped up by Hollywood and so wasn't available. He moved to a very surprising choice, which changed the whole complexion of the film.
I think that Karl-Heinz Bohm brings something to the film in his performance. To find a performer who can both make Mark genuinely engaging and also able to understand the depths of his psychosis was very hard.
You try to understand the human being you are supposed to play, and by understanding it, to interpret it in such a way that you can identify yourself 100% with the person you play. And it went so far that I had a circulation collapse once during the shooting time, and that's because I identified myself so much with this person that it was one of the hardest times I had in my life, I must admit.
Usually a murderer is a murderer, and you can't identify. It's dangerous to have an audience identify or have any sympathy for him or her. And I think this, M does it, Peter Lorre. In M, that speech he has at the end. I don't like Peter Lorre in M. I mean, he's a great actor. It's a great film. I don't want to have sympathy for the child murderer, and yet Fritz Lang at the end has the audacity to do it. And it works. It works.
I'm told by a friend that you have some views for sale.
What sort of views, sir?
Hmm? What?
Some of the key scenes are things like Miles Malleson as the sort of upper-class old man who comes into the newsagents and makes an excuse he wants to buy the Daily Telegraph, but he really wants to buy some dirty pictures. And of course he's mortified when a schoolgirl comes in.
Morning, Mr. Peter.
Morning.
Can I have a crunch, please?
Help yourself, my dear.
Thank you.
Well, and that sort of sense of hypocrisy, of having a kind of erotic fascination, but not wanting to be upfront about it, is very much what the film is about. It's about repression. In the case of Mark Lewis, the central character, he could almost stand for English society. And having been brought up in this extraordinary way, he naturally, like a good and dutiful son, wants to continue that process. But what began as science, in the case of his father, has become something monstrously perverted.
My relationship to Michael, I'm his son, one of his sons anyway, Columba. And I played, uncredited, I played Mark Lewis as a young boy.
I think that Michael didn't take the whole idea of using himself and his son so seriously when he did it. I think he just thought, oh, well, this is a good idea, and Columba will be a good actor, and it'll be fun for us all to be making it together. I really don't think he expected the storm of reaction that he got for doing it. Columba himself quite enjoyed making the film.
In a way, he did feel that it was something best kept within the family. After all, he was able to talk to his son as a father would talk to a son, and able to talk to him on the set in a kind of reassuring way.
Yes, everybody thinks I should be traumatized by it, but it's a movie. That was the movie, and the real life was different.
We see the childhood films of Mark, which are absolutely chilling because they're so amateur. It's the very fact that they are wobbly, that they're blunt, that they're direct, that we see a lizard being thrown down. That's shocking. It's shocking in a new way.
It's very modern, and the material required that. Of course, it was a much more contemporary film than he had made in a long time. And I noticed when I was looking at it recently that there are many, many wonderful dramatic sudden dollies into actors that are very sharp and used at very critical moments in the film, which I don't think you would have seen in earlier films that he had made. They were having such fun experimenting and doing wonderful things, like when Karl Brunn leans over, surreptitiously photographing from rafters, and his pens fall out of his pocket, and this will reveal that there's someone up in the rafters. They built huge, big, long wooden pens and pencils and things and experimented with shooting them falling to the camera. They were just having a great time.
Mark, what are you doing?
Wanted to photograph you watching.
No.
What struck us was, again, the way he put the film together, the use of light, the use of color. This time was Eastman color, a lurid kind of Eastman color. The picture has a nasty edge to it. It brings you to a close, it brings you to, in a funny way, a strange base feelings of a lurid quality, like looking at something of a tabloid, of a National Enquirer almost, only in color.
So it's a film which tells us a surprising amount about the state of cinema in Britain just around the beginning of the 60s. The film we see being made in the studio, where Mark is an assistant cameraman, is a stupid film. It's the kind of stupid film that actually brought British cinema to its knees.
Oh, miss. Cut! How was it? Phil? Tom? Mark? Printed!
The other kind of filmmaking, which is just about to start, is going out into the streets and filming in the streets, cinema verité, as it became known. And really, Peeping Tom is a kind of cinema verité film, and Mark is a kind of rather perverted cinema verité filmmaker. But there's a third kind of filmmaking in it, or photography, which is glamour photography. And of course, that was also something which kept British cinema going. There was quite a lot of business making what nowadays seem rather mild pornographic films.
Ultimately, whatever one can say aesthetically about the film, it is a disturbing picture. It's not a film for everyone, but also it's by a man who knows what a camera is and what a camera can do. The metaphor for a camera killing is very true, I think. That's what makes it, that's one of the things that makes it a great film, I think.
When Peeping Tom was released in France, it was called Le Voyeur, and Michael always thought it should have been called Le Cinéaste, in other words, the serious film lover.
Michael Powell, I think, was intuitively interested in the mechanics of the gaze. If you just think about what's actually going on, we're watching a filmmaker who was looking through his camera and who was holding up a mirror to his victims who see themselves. And so we're involved in a kind of almost an infinite regress. It can't help but produce a kind of meditation on cinema as a voyeuristic machinery.
You're involved in the voyeuristic experience, and there's no getting away from it.
Lines like "Take me to your cinema," which can become really disturbing and off-putting in a way, and there is a lot of cinema that is that way. But Take Me to Your Cinema becomes something very private, because who knows what goes on in the head of a viewer of any film, really. You know, you bring to a film very often something completely different from what the filmmaker intended or what the filmmakers intended. You have people who live by films. You have people whose lives are cut off, in a way, and just live through cinema. I don't say it's a good thing, either, who just sit and watch.
It's no good. I was afraid it wouldn't be.
Mark Lewis is, in a sense, an artist. In fact, he clearly is an artist. He's someone who's dedicated his life to making a perfect film. Now, this perfect film might be what we would call a snuff film, a film that actually deals with, if you like, the ultimate unfilmable moment of someone witnessing their own death.
Mark's final suicide is almost as well a tribute to death within the cinema. If you remember, Mark sets up a number of strip wires of still cameras, and he then runs to his death, tripping over the still photographs, which then take the cinema to stillness and to its own annihilation.
And I'm glad. I'm afraid.
In Britain, there's a kind of gruesome fascination with the reception of Peeping Tom, because it had an unbelievably bad reception from the press critics.
Michael took great relish in incorporating all the bad reviews in his own autobiography. And there, when you read them, you just cannot believe. You can't believe them. This film should be flushed down the toilet. This is worse than any sewer I've ever visited in Calcutta.
It's not that he didn't take the film seriously, but he didn't take it seriously in the way that many people did. He didn't see it as something perverted, outrageous, exploitative.
Basically, his career as a director, and he was one of the most famous directors of the whole world, was finished by that film.
It was just shattering what happened. The film was ripped out of the theaters, sold to a not very good distributor, and vanished until Scorsese brought it back to the world 20 years later.
My assistant at the time I was doing Raging Bull, about to do Raging Bull, came to me and said, I know these young guys at Corinth Films at that time who said that they know that you're a fan of Peeping Tom, and they would like to re-release the film and say, you know, have your Martin Scorsese Presents. It would be $5,000. I said, if I can have a print of the film plus the $5,000, I would give the $5,000 plus a print, and I'd be delighted, you know, to have that happen.
Michael gave so much to Marty in terms of tremendous inspiration and teaching. And here Marty was able to give back to him by getting Peeping Tom re-released, among all the many other things that Marty did for Michael. But that concrete exchange was so beautiful.
The film was reshown in New York by Martin Scorsese, and it was, to be said, one of the best films of the 100 films of the last century to be done. And the critics were so extraordinary that one couldn't believe it. And it showed that the people simply did not understand it at the time when the film was done.
I think there are a lot of filmmakers who've been inspired by Peeping Tom. Because it was such a kind of secret discovery for many, it seemed like a sort of message in a bottle. It was something that was addressed to filmmakers. It's also influenced the work of Brian De Palma in many ways, I think. De Palma's tremendous interest in voyeurism. It's influenced Coppola. You find little strands of it in Coppola, and of course in Polanski. All of those really stem from Peeping Tom, I think. So it's a kind of modern classic, but it's a shocking one still.
This was an assault, this film. It was a slap in the face in a way, and bold slap in the face to an audience. And we can understand at that time why it was reviled.
Not only in film, but in art in general. Very often it happens that the artists, in that case I call Michael Powell, I name Michael Powell, are far ahead from their time.
He once said in an interview with Bertrand Tavernier, he said, I'm not a filmmaker who's got a style of my own. I'm just cinema. He says in his memoirs that everything that he learned about in life in a way came to him through immersing himself in cinema. Cinema was his life.
He never wanted to stop experimenting or stop growing as an artist. So I think he kind of felt that that was part of his responsibility as an artist, that if people couldn't take his art at that moment, he knew that maybe 20 years later they would be able to. But he accepted it. He didn't become bitter about it. He just accepted it, or digested it, shall I say.
Peeping Tom was one of those films which it was withdrawn and it had a history, and it was very difficult to see. Then suddenly it comes back and it's possible to see Peeping Tom again.
Taking my picture?
Yes.
It's a long time since anyone did.
Mark, what's troubling you?
Good night, Mrs. Stevens.
Je me rappelle, avec mes amis du Nickelodeon, ce film nous avait extraordinairement frappés. Pendant très longtemps, ça a été le film qu'on brandissait, dont on parlait tout le temps, en disant, voilà, il y a un film unique, qui ne ressemble à rien, qui est sorti. J'ai vu Le Voyeur pour la première fois au midi-minuit, quand il est sorti en France. Il est sorti en effet en exclusivité dans ce cinéma, le midi-minuit, qui était spécialisé dans le film érotique soft, le film d'horreur, enfin, ce qu'on appelait le cinéma bis dans les revues de cinéma à l'époque. Le Voyeur avait été un choc et on s'était dit, la personne qui a fait le Voyeur doit forcément avoir fait des films intéressants. C'est impossible. Il y a quelque chose de tellement unique dans ce film que ça mérite qu'on se penche un peu sur ce cinéaste.
Michael Powell est anglais. Il est devenu cinéaste en réalisant pendant les années 30 de nombreux films à très petit budget. Mais c'est à partir de sa rencontre avec le scénariste hongrois Emeric Pressburger qu'il va donner sa pleine mesure. À partir de 1939, Powell et Pressburger entament une collaboration exclusive. Ensemble, ils écrivent et réalisent une quinzaine de films tout à fait singuliers qui sont autant d'ovnis dans le paysage cinématographique britannique. Pendant 15 ans, Powell et Pressburger, qui ont formé la compagnie des Archers, mettent dans le mille.
They were lucky to be making films at that time because it was wartime. Film in Britain was considered to be a very important propaganda tool. And one way or another, huge amounts of money were being poured into making films. So they had the support of the film industry with them in the 1940s. And for power, that made it possible to make extraordinary films. A Matter of Life and Death, Colonel Blimp, The Red Shoes. All these films are extraordinarily ambitious films which needed money to be achieved, to be made.
Du Voleur de Bagdad au Narcisse Noir, en passant par Les Chaussons Rouges ou Les Contes d'Hoffmann, les films des Archers deviennent très vite des classiques. Dès la fin des années 40, la télévision américaine les passe et les repasse, notamment dans ses programmes de l'après-midi destinés aux enfants. Ils y découvrent émerveillés les images féeriques, les histoires insolites et les personnages enchantés fécondés par la liberté artistique de Powell et Pressburger. Parmi ces enfants, les futurs cinéastes Francis Coppola, George Lucas et Martin Scorsese sont profondément marqués par l'imagerie des films à la cible. Longtemps après, ils garderont en mémoire le souvenir de ces films où, selon les termes de Scorsese, on avait l'impression que n'importe quoi pouvait arriver, allait arriver. Mais à l'époque, ils ne retiennent pas forcément le nom de Powell. Au même moment, en France, la politique des auteurs qui bat son plein l'ignore complètement.
Tous ces films étaient sortis, je les avais loupés parce que les films les plus anciens avaient disparu de la circulation. Les seuls films de Powell qu'on pouvait voir milieu à la fin des années 50 dans les cinémas de quartier, c'était La bataille du Rio de la Plata, qui n'est pas du tout un film formidable, qui n'est pas très intéressant et qui, je sais pas, correspond, ou en tout cas correspondait dans nos esprits à tout ce que nous n'aimions pas dans le cinéma anglais. Et donc pour nous, ça contribuait à figer Powell dans une image de cinéaste officiel. Il faut dire qu'à l'époque, on était tellement occupé à défendre des cinéastes américains, italiens, on avait tellement de causes à défendre contre la critique dite officielle que le cinéma anglais était passé à l'as, entre Kota Favi, entre le Fritz Lang américain, entre, je sais pas, Bud Buttigieg, Samuel Fuller, on se battait pour tellement de gens déjà que on faisait un peu l'impasse là-dessus. Et puis nous avions, jeunes cinéphiles aussi, une certaine prévention contre le cinéma anglais, hérité de la vision de films anglais des années 50 qui était assez pénible. Des sujets totalement, pour nous, dépourvus d'intérêt, des vieilles bagnoles, la défense d'un tortillard, d'un petit train local, on détestait ça. Et on rangeait bêtement Powell dans cette catégorie. Au moment où il fait Le Voyeur, Powell traverse une très mauvaise passe. Depuis quelques années, il semble les projets auxquels il tient n'arrivent pas à être montés. Ils ont connu avec Pressburger un certain nombre de refus. Celui qu'on peut regretter par-dessus tout, c'est Ondine avec Audrey Hepburn, dont on se dit que ça aurait été formidable. À la suite de tous ces échecs, il a fait des films vraiment anodins, et surtout, il a fait un certain nombre de films calamiteux. Il a fait un film calamiteux, Powell, à ce moment-là, qui est The Queen's Guard, qui est, venant d'un homme aussi intelligent et aussi doué, un film qui reste mystérieux à quel point il peut être aussi calamiteux et aussi peu intéressant. Donc, il est, je sais pas, un peu perdu. Et tout d'un coup, il y a la rencontre avec Marx, et je pense que ce film est tombé tout d'un coup à point, et que Powell montre aussi qu'il peut faire un chef-d'œuvre sans Pressburger.
Léo Marx, le scénariste du film, est un personnage mystérieux. La légende relate qu'il aurait surgi un matin au domicile du cinéaste, auquel il aurait déclaré « Monsieur Powell, que diriez-vous de faire un film sur un jeune homme qui tue les femmes avec sa caméra ?» L'entente fut immédiate, Le Voyeur était né. Pour le rôle-titre, Michael Powell décida d'engager l'acteur allemand Karl-Heinz Böhm. En acceptant d'incarner le personnage sulfureux né de l'imagination de Léo Marx, Karl-Heinz Böhm rompait radicalement avec l'image qu'il avait rendue célèbre dans toute l'Europe, en dehors de l'Angleterre. Celle de François-Joseph, l'époux de Sissi, dans les 3 films qu'il avait interprétés aux côtés de Romy Schneider.
When he came to the screen, I think he would have been really a very new face to an English audience. And I think that adds a quality to it because here you have this non-English character. It adds an alien element to Mark Lewis. Somehow he's at sea in some way. He's a lost character. And I think the fact that they used an actor with a German accent contributes to that sense. When you see him at the window coming home, there's something very lost about him.
From upstairs.
He's not even at home in his own home. He owns this house. It's as if he's the stranger coming into his own house.
Karl-Heinz Böhm n'était pas le premier choix de Powell. Il avait pensé à Laurence Harvey, et Laurence Harvey aurait amené peut-être ce côté antipathique, un peu distant, qui aurait peut-être rendu le film plus acceptable pour la critique. Il avait également pensé à Dirk Bogarde, qui a refusé, et se brouillant avec Powell. Et Bogart ne voulait pas jouer quelqu'un qui soit, selon ses termes, alors c'est très très bizarre parce qu'on se demande s'il a lu le scénario, a child molester. Peut-être que Bogart pensait aux scènes où le personnage de Mark Lewis, enfant, est abîmé par son père, joué par Michael Powell. Et tout ça tourné dans la maison de Michael Powell. Toutes ces scènes, ce qui renforce le côté, comme il dit dans l'interview de Midi Fantastique, le côté autobiographique. Il dit c'est mon plus grand film autobiographique, avec un certain humour. Il y a le retour dans les films de Powell de Moira Shearer, qui était la vedette des Chaussons Rouges et des Contes d'Hoffmann, cette extraordinaire ballerine qui était en même temps d'une très très grande beauté, qui était une très bonne actrice. Il y a un des premiers rôles de Shirley Anfield, qui quelques années après quelques temps après, même quelques mois après, sera la vedette de Samedi soir, dimanche matin, de Carol Rice, mais comme s'il y avait une sorte qui sera le lien entre le cinéma de Powell et le nouveau cinéma de Rice ou de Lindsay Anderson. Il y a Anna Massey que Hitchcock prendra dans Frenzy. Autour de Powell, il y a tous ses collaborateurs habituels, les gens qui ont fait tous ces films, et un chef opérateur avec qui il a déjà travaillé, Otto Heller, qui, dans les années 50, signera les 2 films en couleur les plus distinctifs du cinéma anglais de la décennie, Tueur de dames et Le Voyeur, et 2 films qui sont aussi des réflexions sur les genres, des films qui essayent de se couper de tout un style ouvertement réaliste, même d'éclairage.
Le film achevé fut montré aux critiques anglais qui le démolirent. En le qualifiant à l'unanimité de malsain et de répugnant, ils effrayèrent les producteurs qui suspendirent sa sortie avant de le revendre aux exploitants du circuit porno et semi-clandestin de l'époque.
On ne peut même pas parler de rejet du public, puisque les gens n'ont pas eu la chance de voir le film. Le film a été tellement détruit qu'il n'a pratiquement pas été projeté en Angleterre. Et un journal avait dit, la seule chose à faire avec ce film, c'est d'en voler les bobines et de le jeter dans l'égout les plus proches. La critique était même totalement absurde, puisque le critique du Daily Worker, le journal communiste, allait jusqu'à parler de la musique symphonique insistante et lourde où tous les violons insistent, tout l'orchestre insiste, alors que le film est joué exclusivement au piano. Et je pense que c'est une des exécutions les plus violentes, les plus abjectes de l'histoire de la critique. Je pense que ça a tué Powell, ça a tué sa carrière.
You can understand the critics' reaction. It was difficult for them to see it, to separate the subject matter from the way they would respond to it as a film.
Le rejet de la critique vient de ce que des critiques à la fois conventionnels, puritains, et ne connaissant pas l'histoire du cinéma, ont été profondément choqués par la vision qu'avait Powell de son héros et par la compassion qu'il témoignait envers un meurtrier. Pour eux, un meurtrier devait être quelqu'un qu'on devait soit étiqueter comme fou, et donc il fallait qu'il soit joué comme un fou, ou il fallait le condamner violemment, alors que l'héroïne essaye de le comprendre, voire même de le sauver.
La même année que Le Voyeur, un autre jeune homme, aussi timide et également tueur de femmes, eut les honneurs de l'écran. Mais contrairement à Mark Lewis, Norman Bates, le héros du Psychose d'Alfred Hitchcock, eut la chance, lui, de pouvoir terrifier son public.
Si, à la fin de Psychose, il n'y avait pas eu cette explication qui transforme Bates en un malade mental, je me demande si les spectateurs auraient accepté aussi facilement Psychose.
Effectivement, Hitchcock en a rajouté sur le plan de la loi. Et le discours du psychiatre à la fin est assez remarquable, puisque sous couvert de donner une explication, en fait, il réussit à tout embrouiller. Il nous dit « N'allez surtout pas vous identifier à cette histoire. Cette histoire ne vous concerne pas. Cette histoire, c'est une histoire qui concerne un grand fou. » Il nous parle de dédoublement de personnalité. Dans le grand public, le dédoublement de personnalité, c'est la schizophrénie. Le schizophrène est très différent de moi. Je ne vais pas m'identifier. Donc c'est rassurant. Donc on trouve finalement un parcours assez légitime dans Psycho, c'est-à-dire un premier temps dans lequel on va rentrer dans le film, on va se reconnaître, et puis le film va nous aider, à la fin du film, à nous déprendre, à sortir de cette fascination. Et je peux sortir rassuré, ça n'était pas de moi dont il était question. Alors que Powell, lui, il est beaucoup plus sulfureux. Powell disqualifie tous les représentants de la loi. Il disqualifie toutes les tentatives d'explication Chacun doit chercher.
Mark, what a beautiful little boy. Who is he?
Me?
Of course it is. Then who took this film?
My father.
What a wonderful idea. You'll be able to show it to your own children. You must have had a bad dream. What was the light in your eye? Camera, I suppose.
C'est un film dérangeant. C'est un film qui s'attaque à des tabous. Il met en scène la perversion, certainement. La perversion de Marc, celle qui nous est décrite comme étant le voyeurisme. Ça n'est pas une très bonne représentation, ça n'est pas un film descriptif sur le voyeurisme. La perversion du père, qui est un sadique, elle est à peine évoquée, mais cette évocation est extrêmement douloureuse, elle est d'autant plus efficace qu'elle est discrète.
That will do, Mark. Dry your eyes and stop being silly.
Une enfance cassée, brisée, par un père intrusif, qui le filme à chaque instant, qui lui vole son image et qui lui vole sa peur. Marc part à la recherche de sa peur. Et là où il la trouve, là où il essaie de la trouver, c'est dans le visage de ces femmes, dans le regard de ces femmes, dans ce regard empli de peur. Ce film me fait penser à un autre film qui a suscité beaucoup de réactions. Je pense à Orange Mécanique de Stanley Kubrick.
This Kubrick film with Malcolm McDowell, Clockwork Orange, which came out, and there were all sorts of articles in the press about how it was causing people to behave in violent ways, and Stanley Kubrick himself withdrew the film, and it was forbidden to show the film in England for about 30 years, I think, and then it was released again. I mean, only after Stanley Kubrick's death did it become possible to see Clockwork Orange in England. People would often go off to Paris to go and see the film. It wasn't allowed to be shown in England.
Dans Stanley Kubrick et dans Powell, on retrouve cette même approche dépassionnée de la morale. Justement, c'est une approche amorale de la morale, non pas immorale, ça n'est pas contre. Simplement, c'est une déconstruction du discours moral. Le discours moral, c'est un discours qui a toute sa valeur pour guider nos comportements, mais le discours moral ne nous sert à rien pour comprendre, aborder la question de la sexualité. Ce film nous montre quoi? Il nous montre l'image d'un pervers. Et ce qui est choquant, c'est que nous pouvons tous nous y reconnaître. Qu'est-ce qu'un pervers? Le pervers, c'est un adulte qui vit une sexualité infantile dans sa vie adulte. Le pervers, c'est quelqu'un qui n'arrive pas à fantasmer. Le pervers, c'est quelqu'un qui n'a pas de fantasme, mais il va remplacer le fantasme par une mise en scène. Qu'est-ce que nous voyons? Nous voyons effectivement Marc confronté à cette difficulté d'élaboration du fantasme, et il met en scène, il fait ce qu'on appelle des passages à l'acte. Ici, ce sont des meurtres. Qu'est-ce que cherche Marc? Marc cherche une image de lui, une image qui lui manque. L'image, c'est ce qui va assurer la cohésion, la cohérence à ce psychisme. Marc ne se sent pas cohérent, il est traversé par l'angoisse. Une angoisse qui est une angoisse de morcellement. Son psychisme n'a pas d'unité. Et ce dont il est à la recherche, avec sa caméra, c'est une image. Et c'est une quête stérile. Il n'y arrive jamais.
It's no good. I was afraid it wouldn't be.
Tout ce qui était reproché à Powell dans ses films précédents s'est cristallisé. On lui reprochait de faire des films trop sexuels, qu'il y avait trop de symboles érotiques, que les passions y étaient débridées. Et là, tout d'un coup, tout ce qui avait été emmagasiné comme reproche et qui ressortait à l'occasion de certains films s'est trouvé décuplé par le voyeur. Je veux dire, les spectateurs du midi-minuit que nous étions, nous ne savions pas que nous allions recevoir un choc comme ça. L'horreur ne venait plus d'un vampire, de gousses d'ail, d'un château plus ou moins hanté, ou d'expériences faites par le docteur Frankenstein, mais elle venait d'objets qui étaient associés avec notre vie quotidienne. Et ces objets, tout d'un coup, avaient une portée effrayante, maléfique, avaient un sens qui pouvait être terrible. On va non seulement tuer quelqu'un avec une caméra, mais on va filmer la personne que l'on tue, et pour décupler l'effet, pour pouvoir arriver à capter ce que c'est que la peur, on va ajouter un miroir à la caméra pour que la personne se voie mourir. Tous ces objets, le miroir, le trépied de la caméra, le film à l'intérieur de la caméra, sont des objets quotidiens pour tout cinéaste. Et c'est l'utilisation qui les transforme en quelque chose d'effrayant. Et moi, donc, quelque temps après, j'avais fait le voyage en Angleterre pour aller voir les films. J'avais fait, avec Jacques Preyer, le premier interview de Powell, je crois, qui a jamais paru dans Le Monde. Hein, j'ai une petite fierté, c'est ça, c'est que dans Midi Minuit Fantastique, pour la première fois, on interrogeait Powell, et de cette rencontre est née une amitié qui a duré des années. J'ai découvert progressivement ces films. Il m'organisait des projections. J'ai vu le Blimp, le Narcisse Noir, Je sais où je vais, The Small Back Room, y compris même le Château de Barbe Bleue, qui est très difficile à voir, son adaptation de l'opéra de Béla Bartók. J'avais vu une dizaine de films de Powell et ça avait été le choc de ma vie. Il a connu vraiment une période très très difficile, qu'il a été littéralement sauvé par les Américains, par Coppola, par Scorsese, par George Lucas, qui l'ont invité à devenir professeur ou artiste en résidence, etc., et qui l'ont sauvé. J'ai même fait jouer Michael Powell dans Que la fête commence, où il faisait John Law, l'inventeur des billets de banque, écossais. Et le film étant trop long, j'ai coupé les scènes. Et à cette époque, j'étais tout à fait inconscient, je n'ai pas gardé le matériel, malheureusement. Michael Powell m'avait écrit une lettre après avoir vu Les Rushs, qui est une des plus belles lettres que j'ai reçues de toute ma vie. Il avait vu l'ambition, le projet, le style de mouvement de caméra, le rapport entre les puissants et les domestiques, le rapport au décor et au costume. Et c'est vraiment une lettre de réconfort et de soutien qui ça a illuminé tout le tournage. Il témoignait d'une confiance dans la curiosité du public, dans l'ouverture d'esprit du spectateur, qui, moi, est un immense sujet de réconfort quand j'ai des doutes, à un moment, moi, dans mes propres films. Moi, je revois un film de Powell et je me dis, quand même, il était suffisamment gonflé pour penser qu'un spectateur pouvait accepter, question de vie ou de mort, un film où on passe de la couleur au noir et blanc sans prévenir, ou qui commence dans le paradis, à un moment, enfin, dans l'antichambre du paradis ou de l'enfer, qui se poursuit de manière complètement réaliste pour passer à la fantasmagorie la plus pure. Les gens lui pensaient que les spectateurs pouvaient accepter ça. Quand je suis devenu président de l'Institut Lumière, je me suis dit qu'il fallait qu'on crée une collection de livres, et les premiers titres que je voulais publier dans cette collection, c'était ces 2 livres de mémoire qui sont pour moi les plus beaux livres écrits par un cinéaste. Les livres sont très bien traduits par Jean-Pierre Courcedon et on a fait on les a publiés et je pense que les gens qui les lisent après tombent sous le charme et on a eu des articles et j'ai reçu des lettres de remerciements parce que ces 2 livres sont, à mon avis, pour tout cinéphile, des livres absolument indispensables.
When I first became a filmmaker in the 60s, I didn't even know about Peeping Tom. I think Scorsese may not even have seen it at the time that he was really discovering the films of Powell and Pressburger. It didn't get a very good release in the United States, a very limited, small release. And so when Scorsese discovered Michael Powell living in England and brought him to the United States and revived the whole canon of Powell and Pressburger films, I think that was when Scorsese saw Peeping Tom for the first time and was quite knocked out by it. He managed to get it entered into the New York Film Festival because it had never really had a proper release in America, so he was able to get it into the New York Film Festival where it was a huge hit. People like Francis Ford Coppola saw it for the first time and were just stunned by the film. Marty felt so strongly about it that he actually put up some of his own money to have the film re-released, and that was the start of the comeback of Peeping Tom. But I didn't know anything about it until Scorsese started educating me during the time of Raging Bull about the films of Powell and Pressburger, and I think Peeping Tom was actually not one of the first ones that he showed me, so it was a while before I saw it. I think it would be very natural for Michael Powell to take a different approach to a subject as potentially horrifying as Peeping Tom, that he would not want to make a classic horror film. He would want to find another way to deal with the subject. And I think he sensed immediately that because Mark Lewis, the protagonist in the film, has been tortured by his father in some rather weird and sadistic experiments in terror, that this was someone who was very badly damaged, and Michael wanted to explore that in the character. So he and Carl Boehm came up with a rather startling way of portraying Mark Lewis on film. It's something that we're more used to today, I think, where a supposed villain is explored and understood. But at the time that this film was being made, it was quite shocking that anyone could want to show this character as a sympathetic person, as someone that you actually liked and who was gentle and sweet, as Michael said in his book, and completely mad. And so it's very typical because Powell and Pressburger were always doing unconventional things with their films. They never did anything you expected. And so, of course, Michael would want to take a new and fresh attack on this character. Neither he nor Scorsese ever wanted to portray villains again in their movies. They didn't like that idea. They didn't feel that things were that black and white. They were more interested in the gray area of human behavior. So you'll never really see a classic villain in either of their films. The response of the critics in England was quite shocking, really. I mean, the intensity when you read the full length of the criticisms that Michael very deliberately published in full length in his autobiography. It's quite stunning how vicious the reaction of the critics was. And Michael always felt that the reason they reacted so strongly was that they could not handle the fact that they were feeling sympathy for Mark Lewis in the movie, and yet he was a murderer, and their minds were whirling, and they were deeply upset by how Michael had gotten under their skin by making them feel sympathetic towards Mark Lewis. So I think he was quite shocked by the reviews. I am quite shocked by them still when I read them. But then Michael knew that if he was on the cutting edge of art, it was a very dangerous place to be, way out on a limb, and you can be very easily sawn off when you're in that situation. And he, interestingly enough, accepted that as an artist. He felt that if that happened to you, it had happened to many artists that he knew of. The great mentor, Rex Ingram, who trained Michael as a filmmaker, his career was ruined. And Michael sort of understood that maybe that was part of the deal. If you want to be an artist who's on the cutting edge, you have to expect that your career may be ruined by what you do. And of course, Michael's was, very sadly. It's something that I have learned to digest in my own career with Martin Scorsese, because often his films will be not understood at the time that they come out. Maybe that's a compliment, because that means you're, again, on the cutting edge. You're doing something, you're taking a great leap forward, and people can't understand it at the time. A typical example of this would be Raging Bull, which was not well received when it came out. It took almost 10 years before it was properly received in America and around the world. The same thing happened, for example, with Casino. When Casino came out, people said, oh, it's not Goodfellas, and it's not as good. Now everybody loves it, and so we're getting used to that. I've learned to digest that and understand that maybe Marty's films will not be recognized right away for what they are, and certainly Michael's own experience helped me with that. I certainly think Michael understood that Peeping Tom had ruined his career in England. He was only able to work again in Australia, and later he made a children's film in England, but his career essentially was over. At the time, he was actually younger than Martin Scorsese is today, which is pretty shocking if you think that Scorsese would not be allowed to make films again. It was a terrible thing for him, and he tried for years to raise money in Europe, because he couldn't raise the money in England, but was unable to do so except for a few little quirky films that were made. The interesting thing is that Michael felt very fondly towards Peeping Tom, and we used to talk about it a lot, and we used to have dinner with Carl Böhm whenever he came to England, and Carl was very deeply disturbed by how the film had been received and couldn't quite accept that. Michael had digested it, I think, but he was a bit bemused by the way that some people felt the film was a masterpiece now. I don't think he necessarily felt that way about it. He loved it, and he enjoyed tremendously making it. I mean, they were having so much fun making the movie. They were making so many in-jokes about their own industry, and they were coming up with wonderful new stylistic devices. For example, when the pencils fall out of Mark's pocket, they had to come up with models of pencils that were very big so they could get the effect of the pencils crashing down to the floor. They were very excited by the film. They were having so much fun. And he and Carl Böhm actually went to the press screening, dressed up to go out very elegantly in the evening afterwards and celebrate. And the members of the press came out and just walked by them with disgust, wouldn't even look at them. And that was their first indication that something had gone terribly wrong. Michael always felt that if the distributor had published some of the terrible reviews and then said, this is what the critics are saying, why don't you come see for yourself, the film might have survived. And it could have made its money back in 3 months, because it only cost £135,000. So it was really tragic that the distributor didn't have the courage that Michael himself would have had if he had been in control of the film. But I think it's interesting that for him, maybe he felt the films he made, like The Red Shoes, Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, were perhaps more important for him. What's innovative about the film is that it's, of course, looking at the subject matter in a very fresh and new way, which was quite shocking at the time. But the style of the film is very modern, And it's quite interesting that Michael Powell was able to take such a sudden, quick leap forward into a very modern style of filmmaking and do it with such skill. For example, you're drawn immediately into very intense confrontation with the camera in the movie. By the second shot, the first shot is an eye opening, and you hear the click of a still camera that goes with the opening of the eye. Michael was a great still cameraman and always had a Rolleiflex around his neck. And then immediately you're seeing the point of view of the camera and then the grid in front of the lens. So you're drawn right into the cameraman's view of life. And then the witty little moment where the cardboard box that was holding the film is thrown into a garbage can by the cameraman, and that's the third shot in the sequence, or maybe the fourth shot in the sequence, and right away Michael's telling you he's going to do things with a kind of wit you're not used to seeing. You would never see a shot like that in any other movie. So the film is filled with wonderful camera and lighting devices, and just a incredibly powerful use of the camera to explore this very interesting character.